Hi guys, welcome to your lesson on fossils. So we are moving through Earth history and we did layers of the Earth. There was a short PowerPoint lesson before that actually on different rock types. So igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. And then we moved into layers of the Earth and how to accurately sequence events, which is relative dating, as well as date events using absolute dating, radiometric, ice cores, tree rings. And now we are moving in plate tectonics as well, so the shifting of Earth's plates over time. And now we're moving into fossils, so getting into life and how life has changed. So fossils are just remains of an organism that lived in the past, and all fossils are found in sedimentary rock. And remember, the reason is because sedimentary rock is not ever heated to the point where it would destroy the fossil, whereas igneous and metamorphic are heated, and so the life forms would totally disappear. So fossils give us evidence for how life and environmental conditions have changed over time. There aren't just living organisms like different animals that are found as fossils, but there's also different kinds of plants and stuff that are found as fossils. And that can tell us a lot about the environment as well as the type of life. So there's many thousands of layers of sedimentary rock that have evidence for the long history of how life has changed over time. And those remains are found in the sedimentary rocks. The more recently deposited sedimentary rock, so the sedimentary rock that was made most recently, is more likely to contain fossils resembling existing species. There is a link to this formation of a fossil underneath this video link on the website, so you'll be able to click on it through that. So, all right, the fossil record. The collection of fossils and their placement in chronological order, so in time order, either through relative dating with order of layer formation or with radioactive dating, is known as the fossil record. So there are very specific conditions necessary for fossil preservation. So in order for a fossil to be made, there's a certain recipe, you could call it. It had to be buried really fast, and it has to have hard parts. So not all organisms are in the fossil record because not all organisms have hard bones and not all organisms are buried really fast. And the reason that it has to have a fast burial is because otherwise, if it were just dead, laying out in the complete open, different scavengers could come by and get it, and it would also decompose and decay over time and weather away. If it didn't have hard parts, then that means the soft parts would decompose over time also. So comparisons of living organisms today with fossils allow us to reconstruct evolutionary history and to be able to see how life has changed over time. Fossils give clues about each of the following. It tells us about how diverse life is over the whole course of the history of Earth. So how there are many different types of living things. Fossils tell us about past climate and surface changes on Earth and changes that have occurred with organisms over time. So we can look at organisms and see how they have changed over time by looking at fossils. And this is cool because it allows us to take a look at humans to see how humans have changed over time and to possibly predict how humans are going to change in the future. There's lots of different types of fossils. Not to be super concerned with remembering exactly what each type is and examples of each type, but remembering why we're concerned with fossils. So mold fossils. So when you make a mold of something, it basically leaves like an imprint. So that's exactly what this is. It forms when you have sediments bury in the organism and the sediments change into rock, leaving behind this imprint, leaving a cavity, which is like a hole in the shape of the organism. And this is specifically a Trilobite mold, which is a very, very old. A cast fossil forms when a mold is filled with sand or mud, and then that thing hardens into the shape of the organism. So you actually have a casting or a 3D piece of what the organism looked like. Petrified fossils are also called permineralized, and these are so pretty. If you've ever been out to the petrified forest in Arizona, that's a picture of it on the left-hand side. It's where wood actually petrifies. It's so cool. It forms when minerals they soak into the buried remains and then replacing the remains and change them into rock. The one on the right is gorgeous. So that is actually minerals that have replaced parts of the buried remains. Preserved fossils are when the entire organism or parts of the organisms are prevented from decaying by being trapped in either rock, ice, tar, or amber. And it's really cool to see when something is completely preserved in ice. Amber is really common if you look at the one on the right. Lots of different bugs or different types of plants can be trapped in amber. Carbonized fossils they form when organisms or parts like stems, flowers, or fish are pressed between layers of soft mud or clay. And then that hardens, squeezing almost all of the decaying organism away, leaving just a carbon imprint in the rock, which this looks cool. It looks like it's almost painted on the rock. And it's not painted, but it's when it's pressed between the layers of the mud or clay, and it squeezes that out. Trace fossils are just that, when there is a trace left behind. So it forms when you have mud or sand and it hardens to stone, and that footprint, or it can be like a tail drag line or a burrow of an organism, and that's left behind. It's sort of like if you were to put your hand in concrete, it would leave sort of like a trace in the concrete. All right, the main meat of this second part of the lesson is index fossils. So we just talked about how life has changed over time and why that's important, and now talking about index fossils. So there's certain types of fossils that are called index fossils, and they can be used to help find the relative ages of rock layers. Notice I said relative, not exactly the age, but around about this might have happened this time, and then this happened after this, and then this was next. That's an example of relative. So to be an index fossil, an organism has to have the following. They have to have lived only during a short part of Earth's history, so they didn't live long. Many fossils of the organisms must be found in the rock layers, so there had to have been a lot of this type of organism. The fossil must also be found over a wide area of Earth. So, okay, this thing did not live for a long time, but there were lots of it and spread out all over Earth. And that organism must be unique. Here's why. So, in order to be an index fossil, what you're going to do is you're going to compare two different sections of Earth, okay? Here we notice that on the left side there's a layer 7 and a layer 8 that don't exist on the right. Then layer 6 is in both, layer 5 is only on the right, 4 is in both, 3 is in both. So this is an example of how we're going to eventually use index fossils to be able to date by comparing different layers of rocks over different areas on Earth. So the shorter the time period that it lived, the better an index that it is. A key example is a trilobite. Trilobites are a group of hard-shelled animals whose body had 3 different sections. There was a picture of one just a few slides ago, and they lived in really shallow water and became extinct 245 million years ago. If there's a trilobite in a rock layer, it can be compared with trilobites from other layers to estimate the age of the layer in which it formed. So here we go. We're going to look at these different outcrops. The example I just showed you, there were just 2. Here there are 4, and this one's actually a little easier to like look at because the different organisms are, in my opinion, more distinct as well as the rock layers. So if you look at the very, very bottom, you see that there are 3 different organisms. Outcrop 3 doesn't have any. If you look at the second layer from the bottom, you see that there are, they all have the same thing except for the 4th one. If you look at the 3rd from the bottom, they all have the same except for the 2nd and the 4th. And the top, nothing has the same. So remember, an index fossil had to have lived for a very short period of time. It had to have, okay, so let's take that. It had to have lived for a short period of time. So if we look at the bottom left, or let's look at the letters A, B, C, and D. Look at letter, let's start with letter A. We don't see letter A in the bottom layer. We don't see letter A in the second layer from the bottom. We see letter A in the third layer from the bottom, and we see it in every outcrop, and we don't see it in the top. So we only see letter A in one rock layer, which means one time period, and we see it in all the outcrops. All right, let's look at excuse me, fossil B. Fossil B we see in outcrop 1 twice. We see it in outcrop 2 once. We see it in outcrop 3 twice, and in different rock layers, so it's in the top and it's in the second. And then outcrop 4, we see it in the bottom and the second to the top. So remember, it has to have lived for a short period of time. So anything that's in all 4 layers, not outcrops, but all 4 layers, means that it didn't live for a short period of time. It means it lived for a long period of time. It was living for throughout different layers. So B cannot be an index fossil because it was alive in all the layers. Let's look at C. C, we notice, is also in almost, C is in every single layer. If you look at outcrop 2, it's in every layer. So C can't be it. And D is only in 1, which is outcrop 4. So our criteria for an index fossil, it has to have lived for a very short period of time, and it has to be over a wide area. So A is the only one that satisfies that criteria. It lived for a short time, meaning it's only in one rock layer. So it's in the second from the bottom, or from the top rather. It goes across all 4 outcrops, which tells you that it took place. It was located over a large area. So it didn't live long. It was only in one layer, but it was in all 4 outcrops, which means it was in lots of different locations. So A is our index fossil. Okay, and again, here is that information for you in print. Fossils B and D are found in several layers, but they existed through too much of geologic time to be useful, meaning they didn't live for a short period of time, they lived for a long period of time. Fossil C is found in only one layer, but it's also only in one column, so it's not found in many locations. So A is the best because it's found in only one layer, so it existed for a brief amount of time, and it's found in all 4 columns, which means it is in a lot of different places. Trilobite, again, here is a trilobite. Fossil of a trilobite, and trilobites generally make fossils. Good. All right, so questions. Why are fossils only found in sedimentary rock and not in igneous or metamorphic? And we kind of started off talking about that, so see if you can remember back to the beginning and answer that. And then second, why would an organism have a better chance of becoming a fossil at the bottom of a lake buried by a landslide compared to one on top of a hill or on a beach? Again, that was in the beginning of the video, so if you need to rewind back to the beginning to answer either of these or to check yourself, please do. And last, why would a worm have a chance, or would a worm have a chance at becoming a fossil? Why or why not? Again, look back at your criteria for what the recipe for fossil formation is. And think about a worm. Is it made of bones? Is it made of soft parts? What do you think about worms and whether or not they could become a fossil based on what they're made of?